The Battle of Actium is widely considered by historians to be one of the most significant and critical naval battles in history, deciding the fates of one of humanity's strongest empires. The battle was fought on 31 BCE in Actium, Greece, between the forces of Octavian and Agrippa, and Mark Antony and Cleopatra. It was an intense political war that lasted years, followed by a brutal naval battle that left thousands dead. However, not many people outside of military historians actually know about this important battle. Why is that? Historians blame it on many things, but the most realistic reason is likely from a lack of accurate information on Mark Antony's side due to extreme propaganda generated from Octavian and his many devout supporters. The conflict between Octavian and Antony was primarily a prolonged political struggle, with each side working over many years to enhance their own reputation while simultaneously undermining the others, and ending with a bloody mess on the waters of Actium. Wait a minute, pause. Who the hell is Mark Antony? And Octavian? Don't worry, everything will be explained in just a second. At the very end of the Roman Republic, a man named Julius Caesar started preaching that a dictatorship would save the collapsing Roman Republic. He became insanely popular to the point where the Roman Senate wanted him dead, which inevitably got him assassinated on the famous Ides of March, 44 BCE. Caesar was immortalized in history and became a martyr for the people of Rome. Mark Antony was a loyal general to Caesar and was set to inherit Caesar's throne and wealth. However, Octavian, Caesar's great grandnephew, was unexpectedly named heir to the throne in Caesar's will. This upset Antony, as Octavian was just a child at the time. As time passed, though, Octavian grew into a cunning and dangerously intelligent rival whose specialty was being a powerful speaker and politician in Rome. Both of these men wanted complete control over Italy after Caesar's death, and although both wanted to follow Caesar's footsteps, they had different visions of Rome's future. This, combined with their political rivalry, made the two natural enemies. Although the two teamed up as the Second Triumvirate to defeat the armies of Brutus and Cassius, two of Caesar's assassins, they quickly split up due to Antony's failed marriage with Octavian's sister Octavia. As Octavian's popularity grew, so did his power. Agrippa, a longtime friend of Octavian's, with whom he had been educated side by side, saw his brother saved during the Civil War when Octavian intervened on his behalf. This secured Agrippa's lifelong loyalty and trust, rare traits that were almost non existent at the time. Although Octavian was an excellent politician and leader, he was a horrendous general, which was where Agrippa shone. He is widely regarded as one of the greatest Roman generals of all time. Octavian, with the help of Agrippa, saw many victories in the following years, defeating Caesar's former enemies such as Sextus Pompey. Agrippa was also forced to learn and master naval warfare as to properly defeat the boat King Sextus. Meanwhile, Antony, still upset that he'd never inherited Caesar's fortune, planted his main base in Egypt. This had a negative effect on his reputation in Rome, being so far away from his supposed people, not to mention the multiple losses Antony experienced prior to his move into Egypt. It was here that Antony met Cleopatra, a former lover of Caesar and the last leader of the Egyptian people. The two quickly became lovers and functioned as a sort of power couple, gaining mass popularity in both Greece and Egypt. Antony, seeing Octavian grow so quickly, started to mobilize Greece and Egypt with the thought of bringing Octavian to him. After setting up a supply chain that stretched half of Greece from Egypt, Antony developed a large naval fleet consisting of 500 large galleys, 60 of which were Cleopatra's, and upwards of 70,000 infantry on these ships. Octavian had 400 small galleys and roughly 80,000 infantry on ships. However, he boasted a large number of naval veterans from Agrippa's previous battles with Sextus. Thanks to Agrippa's naval experience, he was able to effectively navigate the Mediterranean directly across to Greece. specifically to Antony's base at Methone, which guarded his long supply chain up from Egypt. Agrippa was able to quickly overtake the base using the few men he was supplied with. The reason why Agrippa took Methone was due to its strategic location, allowing him to destroy Antony's supply ships. From here, Agrippa stormed more bases along the coast, attacking even more of Antony's supply ships in the process. As soon as Antony figured out what was happening, it was too late, as up north, Octavian arrived with his ships and troops much earlier than Antony had expected. Antony was now wedged in between Octavian's northern land troops and Agrippa's increasingly growing naval fleet from intercepted supply ships. Antony could either march north and fight Octavian or try his luck with Agrippa's fleet. He eventually chose to march north. This triggered Agrippa to attack even more supply ships from Egypt, completely cutting Antony's army off from food. By spring 31 BCE, Antony had staged multiple small attacks on Octavian's army up north, with none of them being successful. Octavian and Agrippa planned on waiting for as long as possible not to attack until Agrippa's destruction of Antony's supply chain bore fruit, which it did in the summer of that year. At this point, Antony's troops were starving and his allies in Greece were extremely worried, with many of them leaving and going back deeper into Greece. Octavian and Agrippa's fleet was rapidly growing while Antony's was shrinking, and Antony could do nothing about it. In the fall of that year, on a foggy day, Antony decided to break the stalemate and move his ship blockade along the coast forward. Initially, this move was successful, as Antony encountered several of Octavian's smaller ships in the fog and forced them to retreat. However, it turned out to be a trap, with the fog concealing Agrippa's large fleet. Antony was forced to retreat swiftly to minimize further damage, though it is estimated that many casualties occurred that day. This small loss inflicted significant damages onto Antony and his remaining allies, as well as his starving men. After deciding on whether to fight inland or in a naval battle, Cleopatra played a key role in influencing the decision to battle at sea. Antony gathered his remaining troops and ships in his blockade, which was roughly 20,000 people, while Agrippa and Octavian combined their fleet and waited, which was roughly 40,000 people. At this point, Antony still had a strong fleet with state-of-the-art warships, while Agrippa had an enormous fleet in number but not in quality, with most being stolen supply ships unfit for combat. It was here that Antony strategically placed Cleopatra's small fleet behind his own in an emergency situation. All other troops were stuck on land, unable to do anything. On September 2nd, the two sides were at a standstill for nearly half a day, with either side hoping the other would advance to their own benefit. Finally, Antony advanced, moving all his ships forward and matching Agrippa's line. Most of the combat that was put to use was hand to hand, with men jumping from either boats and fighting each other. However, Agrippa used his smaller boats to maneuver between Antony's larger vessels, cutting at the oars and rendering them immobile, which made boarding easier. Antony's northern fleet was the first to weaken, striking Antony to send more ships from his southern fleet to support. Agrippa sensed this and moved more of his ships upwards as well to counteract his efforts. Eventually, Antony's side was completely exhausted and gave way for Cleopatra's ships at the flank to support. However, instead of offering support, Cleopatra's 70 ships abruptly fled, retreating in what appeared to be an act of betrayal. Antony was able to take one-third of his ships and retreat with her, deserting his thousands of troops in the process. Historians today look upon this retreat as not an act of betrayal, but as a strategic move, providing Antony with a last stand in Egypt later on. Almost all of Cleopatra's troops surely would have died to Agrippa's hand if they would have stayed. The battle that then ensued was nothing short of a slaughter, with reports of soldiers burning alive and being dragged underwater. As soon as Antony's ships discovered that he had deserted them, they immediately surrendered to Octavian, while the remainder of land troops agreed to switch sides in exchange for money. The battle was a victory for Octavian and Agrippa. Although both sides suffered heavy casualties, the battle was a major turning point for Octavian and Agrippa, almost completely turning Rome in their favor. The battle ultimately led to Antony's suicide in Egypt, following another defeat by Octavian and Agrippa, which then soon led to the unification of Italy. Octavian was later renamed Augustus and crowned the first emperor of Rome, with Agrippa as his right-hand man for 40 years until his death. This battle was a major turning point in Roman history, shifting from a democracy to a pure autocratic government. So, now you know about the Battle of Actium, one of the most important naval battles in history. Consider yourself educated. Goodbye.